This is Songs of Conquest. There are times in gaming where if you want a specific type of game, there are only one or two series that actually do it. And this is exactly the case with games like Heroes of Might and Magic and King's Bounty. If you want that very specific, unique type of turn-based strategy RPG, then those are pretty much the only games that you can go to get it. There's nowhere else that really does anything quite like that. I mean, Age of Wonders is kind of similar, but that's more of a 4X strategy, so it's not really the same thing. So basically, if you want a Heroes-style game, you play Heroes. That's about all you got. But of course, as often tends to happen with a long-term beloved series like this, they're often sort of held hostage by market forces, where if that style of game isn't really popular anymore, then they won't make it, and since that was the only place you could find it, then you just can't play it anymore. And this is exactly what happened with these games. Heroes of Might and Magic had, of course, HoMM 7, which was not very well received. It was a sort of outsourced, low-quality version of the Heroes of Might and Magic formula that just was not good. It felt very unfinished, its UI was terrible, it just wasn't really a great game, and that basically killed the franchise. It probably is temporary that it's dead, but it is still dead nonetheless for now. And the same thing happened with King's Bounty, which was another unique spin on this idea, and King's Bounty 2 released and was not great. It kind of didn't seem to understand what people liked about King's Bounty, what made it unique, and so with both of these series, they're kind of dormant right now, and if you want that style of game, pretty much your only choice is to play older entries in those series, because that's the only place you can find this sort of gameplay. And so the indie scene does one of the things that it does best, which is to have people that were passionate about these games, that knew what was good about them, that knew what they liked, and make their own version of these games with blackjack and hookers, and that's exactly what we have here with Songs of Conquest. It is a Heroes of Might and Magic style game with this really nice detailed sort of 2.5D art style. It actually kind of reminds me of the Dominions games, but with a lot more detail. The sprite work is phenomenal, it's really detailed, has a lot of character to it, looks great up close and far away, and the overall world design and the way that the sort of environmental graphics look is very nice and has a lot of atmosphere to it. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of this game's overall presentation style. The first thing to note, though, is that even though this game is currently in early access, it is actually almost feature complete. Like, it's seriously nearly done already. Now, of course, this is not normally how games release into early access at first, but in this case, it is like several years into development at this point, and it has most of its features already in the game, and instead of being a sort of feature update type of campaign, it is instead about balance and quality of life and things like that. So you already have all four of the factions available in the game. That might be less than your average Heroes game, but they are at least quite different. You've got your knights and cavalry and siege equipment and all that sort of thing as a faction. You've also got undead, which is my favorite, being a Necropolis player, and the undead have some really fun unit designs, by the way, and some other cool abilities besides. You've also got the Rana, which are a swamp-dwelling, like, amphibious frog folk, and there are various types of beasts and creepy crawlies and other nasties that they can recruit, which is pretty cool. They're a really fun faction. And you have the mercenaries, which are a lot less sort of cohesive by design and have gunpowder and some other things like that and lots of tricky tactics and the like. You've also got two full campaigns already in the game, one for the Swamp Dwellers and one for the Knights, and they are pretty long. I mean, they're like 4 missions each, but the missions themselves are on quite large maps, so there's a lot of gameplay in the campaigns. And one really nice little touch about the campaigns is that as you complete the missions and go to the next stage, you get a little song for your current wielder, as they're called, which is your hero, your current wielder's accomplishments. They are recorded in a tavern song that is actually sang to you verse by verse as you complete the various missions, which is a really nice little bit of atmosphere there. I like that. And you, of course, also have these skirmish modes with various different skirmish maps available and some really nice tools that are used for actually creating your own scenarios. They actually have launched with mod support already in the game, so you have map and scenario creation tools right from the start, which is a huge deal for me because I'm sure myself and a lot of us watching right now really enjoyed playing custom scenarios and things as skirmish maps in the Heroes games. That's most of what we did. And in fact, there were some really good mods and tools that made use of these and made them really fun. So having that stuff right from the start is a huge deal, and I think it shows a lot of confidence in the product to hand players the keys already and say, you know, go make what you want. We already have this support for customized content in the game. That's really awesome, and this includes making entire campaign scenarios and things too, so there could be a lot more of that relatively soon if people really grab onto this and start making their own stuff, which, given the sales numbers, I have a feeling is definitely going to happen. The overall gameplay is very familiar if you've played Heroes of Might and Magic or King's Bounty before. You are on a very large map that is full of all sorts of random stuff for you to come across. You have a town that you can slowly upgrade by collecting various building materials and gold. You can upgrade this town, which will increase its area of effect and allow it to have new building spots, and you can build all sorts of different faction buildings on these building spots, from things that help you recruit new units to things that help you research upgrades for your armies and all sorts of things besides. Your wielder can, of course, have a whole bunch of different units from that faction and from other factions, depending on what all is on the map and who wants to be recruited and stuff like that. And you will travel along this map, getting all sorts of different resources and finding various artifacts that you can actually equip on your wielder, which will affect your whole army through the stats that they are given. So, as is often the case, there are several different sort of viable builds, depending on exactly what type of wielder you want to play. There are several different wielders to choose from when you're playing Skirmish as well, each starting with their own different types of army compositions and different stats. And this is one part of the game that I'm actually really impressed with, is the actual map variety. The maps are very large, like significantly large, and they have a lot of different stuff on them. There are all kinds of things you can find, from permanent upgrades to the wielder that visits them, to of course various things that offer experience, gold, resources, new troops, and stuff like that, and all sorts of other bonuses and other things like that that you can find that makes exploring very rewarding and pretty much necessary, of course, because you will want to explore around, pillage stuff, take new cities, take new territories, claim all sorts of mines and other resource nodes, and make your army more and more powerful. And of course you will be going against other enemy wielders that have their own territories, their own armies, and their own agenda. Combat is of course a very important part of this concept, and the combat will be very familiar to you as well. If you've played something like Heroes, it is a turn-based, hex-based affair with all of your troops moving as stacks, and the larger the stack you have, the more damage and health they'll have. And as stacks take damage, they will slowly lose numbers, getting weaker and weaker until eventually the entire stack is killed, and you've got to replace your losses with all the various recruitable units all along the map. So you can, of course, have a nice cadre of troops following you around, and as you level up your wielder, you will gain access to all sorts of upgradable abilities. You can get a lot of different passives, and these passives have several upgrades each, so that you can choose to upgrade your overall leadership, so you can have, of course, more stacks of units, or upgrade certain passives that make them stronger or more tanky and things of that nature. And of course, as you get to more rare and expensive and elite units, they often have their own activatable abilities in battle, often things that end their turn but do something important, you know, big party-wide buffs or big long-range attacks, or depends on the exact type of unit you're talking about. But this means there's actually quite a bit of strategy in the battles, as you would expect. And one thing that adds to all of this is the game's magic system, because it is a little bit different than your usual sort of Heroes magic system, and I really like the way that it works, actually. There are 5 different types of essence, which is basically mana. In this game, there are 2 opposing groups, and then 1 sort of non-elemental, you could say. There's order, chaos, creation, destruction, and arcana. And the way that it works is that each stack of troops actually has its own one of these essences, or sometimes multiple of these essences, that it gives you every turn. So you actually gain magical power, you gain mana, every one of your creatures' turns in battle. And since each creature contributes different types of essences, it can be a really good idea to have more diverse stacks of creatures in your army to give you more of this magical power per turn. Each one of these different types of mana has about 4 different spells in each group that you can cast for different amounts, ascending amounts, and then there's also another group of about 20 spells that are mixed essence spells that take multiple different types at once. So spellcasting can be pretty powerful in this game, and is one of the biggest things to look out for when you're facing enemy wielders. And it's kind of a neat concept because it makes you want to compose an army of different types of units that you might not normally want to, or might not expect to, I guess you could say, in order to get their various essence bonuses. So instead of going for what you think might be the strongest, instead you go for a different strategy that allows you to also cast various spells to buff your party or debuff the enemy party or things like that, to sort of supplement the various abilities of the units that you have on your team. So I think it adds to the overall strategy of the game by making this whole magic casting system very much dependent on the type of troops that you're leading in the first place. So overall, there's a lot here, and I think it's a very, very solid game. I think it is launched in such a nice state that I don't have any qualms with recommending it for its price, because there's a lot of content here, and it already feels so feature complete and quite polished that it's almost doesn't even feel like an early access game, to be honest. It definitely is, but you can barely tell in a lot of aspects because it's so well presented already, and I think that's really, really cool. Now, how about those early access criticisms? What is it that needs change? What could be fixed? Well, I think one of the big problems that I personally have right now, it doesn't ruin the game by any means, but it is noticeable, is I think it might be a little bit too difficult on the normal difficulty setting. It's partially because there's only easy and normal right now. There's only 2 difficulty settings, but, well, normally I don't like to complain about the difficulty in a game because, you know, usually it's because I'm not good enough, and there's nothing objectively wrong with the difficulty in a game. I just need to get better. However, in this game's case, I think there might be a little bit of an exception, because the thing with games like this is it's very normal for the AI to cheat a little bit. That's not really a problem in and of itself. When it comes to like turn-based strategy and 4X games, the AI usually, you allow them to fudge the numbers just a little bit to make them more of a threat to you. You know, they have a little bit more resources than they should, or they can build units a little bit faster than they should, things like that. It's very standard to allow the AI to cheat just a bit to make them a little bit more of a threat to you, and just make up for the fact that they're not a player. So, you know, you gotta give them a little bit of an advantage, I guess. But in this game's case, I think the cheating is just a little bit too blatant on normal difficulty, because it is often the case that enemy wielders come with such massive, ridiculous armies that they're almost impossible to beat at certain times. And if you do decide to throw a lot of resources into beating them to try and set them back a little bit, and you actually do kill them, they'll often respawn so quickly and with such a large army almost immediately that it feels like just a complete waste of time. Like, it seems like maybe they're going a little bit overboard on how much the AI is able to build up its armies that quickly, to the point that beating them almost feels pointless. Unless you're able to completely steamroll them all at once and win the game, you may as well not even try to beat any of them individually, because the losses that you'll take are a lot more significant than any setback you could inflict on them when they can just respawn like a turn later with a huge army again. I'll also say that the game might need a bit of an optimization pass, which is pretty common for this stage of development. You know, that's usually one of the later things that's done once a lot of the content is frozen in place. And mostly it's down to the overall open map that tends to chug a little bit. It stutters a lot when you're scrolling around it. Battles run just fine, and a lot of the other stuff runs fine, but when you're scrolling around on the map and the main map screen, it does slow down a little bit, which is kind of a, well, you know, it's just one of those things that you notice while you're exploring, because you'll have to click an extra time or something like that because it stutters very slightly and misses your click, and it all adds up to being just a little bit stuttery, you know, just performing a little bit below par in general. It's probably the kind of thing that could be fixed relatively well at this stage of the game, so I expect they're probably keeping an eye on that and are in fact going to be doing some of those passes as time progresses in this campaign, so that's not really a huge deal. But overall, the one thing that I personally want to see the most is the ability to make our own factions. I think that a game like this would benefit very heavily from its mod tools opening up the ability to create your own entire factions, your own wielders, your own units and everything, you know, make your own sprite work, that kind of stuff, because I could see like workshop support for this game being awesome and really taking off. If you could make entire factions, people would make story modes for their own factions, people would try and balance these factions to, you know, join with the rest of the game. It could be a lot of fun, and I would really like to see that, especially because the game only has 4 factions right now. They are 4 very different and very well realized factions, but there's always room for more, and I think it would be a lot of fun if there was a lot of official support and a lot of good tools to allow players to actually get in on that and make their own. So that is Songs of Conquest in its current state. It is very nearly content complete and very easy to recommend, and it just feels really good to play one of these games again and be enjoying myself. You know, it feels like it's been a long time, probably since like Heroes 6, that I've been able to play a game in this style and actually have a really good time, and I'm having a blast with this game. It clearly understands what people love about this type of gameplay and is pulling it off with fine style, a really nice art style, and some excellent combat and strategic choices and things. So yeah, Songs of Conquest is probably going to be one of those indies that takes the front page of Steam by storm for a while, and it very much deserves it. Thank you guys very much for watching. I will put a link to this game's Steam store page in the description below this video, and I'll see you guys next time.